So this month we are talking about joy. Joy is part of our theme for 2023. Our overarching theme is building a community, and then we looked at what qualities were present in a successful community, and one of those is joy. And so this month we're focusing on that. And I'm using a book called The Book of Joy, which is written by Douglas Abrams, but it's an account of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu and His Holiness the Dalai Lama spending a week together at the Dalai Lama's compound in India for his 80th birthday. And it's quite amazing. If you ever have an opportunity to read it or listen to it, I bought the Audible version of it first. And so listening to it in the car, I was laughing like crazy, listening to these two elderly gentlemen cut up all day long with each other. It was quite a wonderful thing. But in this book, they talk about the 8 pillars of joy. And last week, I talked about the first 2, perspective and humility. Those are the first 2. They divide their 8 pillars of joy into qualities of the mind and qualities of the heart. And so the qualities of the mind are perspective, humility, humor, and acceptance. And the qualities of the heart are forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. And so this month I'm taking a look at those qualities and seeing what's in there for us to understand about each one of those things. And so this week happens to be humor and acceptance. And I thought we would have a little fun with it today. So you may know that Friday is St. Patrick's Day. So I'm going to throw a little Irish in today for you. So get ready for it. I think I might be making the leadership council a little nervous later on, but that's okay. So humor. Humor, like the word humility, comes from the Latin word humus, which means of the earth. And so humor, humility, those are both traits that ground us and get us back in touch with our roots and our centeredness in this world. If we practice humility, we get away from thinking that we're all that in a bag of chips, and we get back to understanding, that I have my own self do nothing. It's spirit within me that's doing the work that's happening here through me. And so as we begin to develop that humility and so forth, one of the things that naturally leads out of that is the ability to laugh at ourselves, the ability to make fun of ourselves because of some of the silliness that we do, some of the traits that we have, some of the qualities, just to begin to look at laughing at ourselves. Sometimes it's self-deprecating humor, and that's okay too. Sometimes it's like, okay, this is me, this is what I'm doing, and you know what? Darn it, it's funny. And so to begin to be able to look at that and to laugh at ourselves is one of our greatest gifts. In the book, Desmond Tutu says this about laughing at yourself. He says, learn to laugh at yourself. It's really the easiest place to begin. It's all about humility. Laugh at yourself and you won't be so pompous and serious. Now, this is a man who's the Archbishop of South Africa, okay? No pompous and no seriousness. If you start looking for the humor in life, you will find it. If you stop asking, why me, and start recognizing that life happens to all of us, it'll make things easier, including your ability to accept others and accept all that life can bring. Humor leads us into acceptance, and so that'll be the second pillar that we talk about today. It can actually be a way of getting ourselves back into just accepting what is happening for us. Humor is one of those, it's like a pressure valve. I kind of think of it like that little thing on top of a teapot, and when the pressure builds so much, it's got to come up. And of course, it whistles on a teapot. But it's like there's that release of humor. How many of you have ever hurt yourself and laughed? The whole thing with your funny bone, banging your elbow on something. And what do? We laugh about it because we're releasing that energy. There's like all of a sudden this intense energy of the pain, and it has to be released some way. And one of the ways that we often do that is by laughing, letting that pressure off, letting that steam release. Humor can be a powerful tool for managing our stress and our anxiety. Find something funny to read, find somebody funny to listen to. Whatever it is that you find joy in and humor in, find those things to do when you're under stress, when you're under anxiety. Humor allows us to accept the unexpected. So oftentimes these unexpected things happen in our lives, and we're like, well, what do we do with this? But if we can learn to make fun of it and learn to look at it in a lighter way, then we can begin to accept it. And again, that helps manage some of those stressors that we have when we are feeling uncertainty. The other thing that the Archbishop talks about is how humor allows us to speak truth to power in a way that people can hear. So for instance, he gives an example of telling the story about people with big noses and people with small noses. And he, of course, has a very large nose. And so as he's telling this story and laughing at himself for his physical feature on his face and so forth, he's actually relating a story about prejudice. And people in the audience actually begin to get an understanding of what he's talking about, but he doesn't ever have to call out that there's prejudice happening here, because he can do it through telling a funny story, a humorous story. He says that it gives you the ability to ignore the severity, but a way to speak truth that others can hear. And so, we often have these difficult situations where we have to have hard conversations with people. And sometimes if we can find a little place for humor in it, and oftentimes, like I said, if we turn it towards ourselves, then the other person doesn't feel like we're putting them down. And we can laugh at ourselves and use ourselves as examples in the situation, then that begins to give the other person a place to feel similar feelings. Because they realize that, if you've got it, they've got it too. Humor can be very cruel. We've all heard those jokes that are just horrific. And we've often found ourselves laughing at them in spite of the fact that they are horrific. But humor can also be a powerful tool to help us move through things together. So as I said, this is coming up on St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day is the day that everybody gets to say they're a little bit Irish. So we're going to do a little fun with St. Patrick's Day. You may know some of these humorous jokes that the Irish have. They are actually known for their humor. But one of the things that I really love about Irish humor is a thing called a limerick. So, limericks, I used to teach a poetry unit to my students when I was teaching school, and that was one of the things that they had to write. They had to write several different kinds of poems, but I always made them write a limerick too. So in case you're not sure what a limerick is, I'll give you an example here. The limerick packs laughs anatomical into a space that is quite economical. But the good ones I've seen seldom are very clean, and the clean ones so seldom are comical. We can find different ways of bringing humor into our lives. We can do it through different forms of humor like this, or we can go to places where, Las Vegas happens to be very fortunate to have a plethora of comedians doing shows here. There's so much humor that you can find on television, books that you can read. I love to read an author who's got a quick wit. I just think that's one of the best things that's ever out there. Is if an author can turn that phrase and make me laugh while I'm reading their book, I think that's masterful. So, humor can help us find more joy in our life, but so can the practice of acceptance. Now, acceptance is not resignation or defeat. Acceptance is a quality that brings to you a sense of peace. It's that phrase, and that phrase has been often overused. It is what it is. Sometimes people will say that to me, and I'm like, it kind of irritates me when they say it, because I'm like, yeah, well, I don't want it to be what it is. But it is what it is. This is when we can learn to look at something and say, okay, this is what I'm faced with right now. What do I do with this? How do I begin to accept it? When we're faced with difficulties, we often want to rail against them. We want to struggle. We want to fix it. We want to fight against it. We really want to do anything possible to have that not be our experience. But if we accept it, and we accept that we are not able to solve the problem right now in the space that we're in, that gives us control over our thoughts and feelings. If I can begin to say, okay, this is what it is, this is what's happening for me right now, what is here for me? Instead of asking that question, why is this happening to me? I ask the question, what is here for me? And I can begin to see a clearer picture of how I can adjust my thoughts and feelings and have a different experience in this situation. The situation is what it is. It's happening. And there are times in our lives when we cannot do anything about that. But if we can begin to accept it and say, okay, what is here for me to know? Where am I to grow? What kind of things are here for me in this situation? Then I begin to have control over how I feel about it, my thoughts and my feelings around it. This is where one of my favorite practices, it's a Buddhist practice called metta, M-E-T-T-A. In English, we call it loving kindness. And this practice of loving kindness is very powerful in allowing us to get to that place of acceptance. In the practice of loving kindness, we first turn the loving kindness towards ourselves. And there are just some phrases that you repeat. I happen to like a version that is done by the singer Karen Drucker. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. And may I be happy. And once you get centered within yourself, then you can turn it outward to the situation, to the people involved in the situation, and just change the I to you. And then you can go even further with that and bring the two of you together and say that may we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. And may we be happy. There's no part of that where I'm acknowledging that this is not painful. There's no part about that where I'm acknowledging that the other person in the situation doesn't have any responsibility in it. But it's me acknowledging that I don't want to feel all the disturbance that's going on in my life because of this situation. I'd rather be filled with loving kindness. A very, very powerful practice. It's actually goes back to that first pillar that we were talking about, and it gives us a place to look at something from a wider perspective, from a more universal consciousness, from a place of equanimity within ourselves. Because again, like I said, with the loving kindness, we start with ourselves. And until you feel that peace and balance within you, you don't move on. You know, you've got to get it clear in your own consciousness first. You've got to get it clear in your own being before you can turn it outward. And so once you begin to do that, we get to that place, what the Buddhists call equanimity, which is balance, which is a non-reactive state in either direction. It just is what it is. So these meditative practices, they allow us to quiet our mind, to get away from all those distracting thoughts and feelings, so that we can actually get a different perspective on the reality that is happening right then and there, and give us an opportunity to respond to it in a more skillful way, in a way that brings us peace and joy instead of the disturbance that we're feeling. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, the ability to be present in each moment is nothing more and nothing less than the ability to accept the vulnerability, the discomfort, and the anxiety of everyday life. These things happen to us, or happen for us. These things are different situations in our lives occur that get us angry, that sadden us, that disturb us, that cause us fear. And we can spend time stuck in those emotions, or we can begin to get to a place of more peace. So here's another limerick for you. At times I'm so mad that I'm hopping. My angriness sets my veins popping. I yell and I curse with swear words diverse. It can only be cured by my stopping. So, when we get to that place where we can actually stop all of those emotions that we're feeling, all that anxiety, all that stress, all that tension, all that anger, we get to a place where we stop that and just say, okay, I've had my moment. What's here now? Where do I go from this? Because staying in that moment just keeps us worked up. Again, this is changing our perspective about things. It's actually beginning to learn a little bit of humility. I can't fix this situation, but I can change how I react to it. It's applying humor to it. And it's learning to practice acceptance. And all of this takes practice and time and commitment and a willingness to be transformed. Otherwise, we're stuck in the mired in the muck and so forth that we can't really get out of. So, as I said, this coming Friday is St. Patrick's Day, and so I wanted to take some of this into a practice for you. And one of the things that we kind of like to do here in our center is a thing we call reverse offerings. And so reverse offering is just the exact opposite of what we do when we take our collection in a service. This is when we're giving something back. So I'm going to ask the ushers to pass out the reverse offering. There's a little bag with a pin in it in there, one for each one of you. So if you would take one and then pass the basket on, and we'll get those to you. We're going to use your little gift here as a spiritual practice. I'm all about the practice. I am all about finding ways to actually take these things that are high and holy ideas and put them into real life work in my life, real action in my life to bring about that change. As I said before, we can stay stuck in the bad feelings that we're having, or we can change how we think about them. Debbie, would you make sure you take the basket behind the cameras too? There's a few people back there. As soon as everybody has one. Remember those days when you were in school and if you weren't wearing green on March 17th, you got pinched? When I started teaching, we stopped doing that. By that time, I was like, yeah, we're not having that. The first couple of years, we were pinning shamrocks onto kids. And instead of pinching each other, they'd take the pins out and stick each other. Oh. You can just imagine, right? Okay, so this is a shamrock or a three-leaf clover. It's not a lucky four-leaf clover, it's a three-leaf clover. These are synonymous with St. Patrick and mostly with Ireland. And the reason they're synonymous with St. Patrick is because he used it as a teaching tool. He taught the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, using a three-leaf clover. One petal represented God as the Father, one, God as the Son, and the third one, God as Holy Spirit. And then he said that the stem joined them all together into one unified thing. Now, in Science of Mind, our philosophy here, we have our own form of the Trinity. It's very much like the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. We use different names usually for them, but Father, Son, and Holy Ghost are absolutely perfect for us to use too. We have what we call the creative process, and the creative process has 3 stages to it. It starts in what we call mind, which could also be called Father, as St. Patrick would have used. It can be called Spirit, the divine, universal consciousness, love, intelligence. In fact, there are so many different names for it that in the first 4 chapters of our textbook, Ernest Holmes uses 88 different names for this thing he calls God. So it doesn't really matter what you call it. Find the thing that works for you. Find the words, the phrase that works for you for that moment, and don't be worried that if it changes. I have some friends, I have one friend who calls it Ta, T-A, which means the all. I have another friend that calls it Howard, Chris, and Grace. Our Father who art in heaven, Howard be his name. Chris for the Christ consciousness, and Grace because that brings in the divine feminine. Doesn't matter what you call it. Howard, Chris, and Grace. Yeah, we love that, don't we? So, and it's always all 3. It's not just like, dear God. It's always all 3 of them. Howard, Chris, and Grace. So, if we take our one petal on this, and it doesn't matter which petal you use, generally in our teaching symbol, mind is at the top of the teaching symbol, but the teaching symbol can also be turned on its head or sideways or anything else. It doesn't really matter the direction. So just choose one of these petals. And that's going to represent that universal consciousness, God, the living spirit, almighty, whatever you want to call it. Our second form of the Trinity is what we call soul. It can also be called things like the receptive part of spirit, receptive, and where the mind is more directive, the soul is more receptive. It receives the impressive spirit. And when it gets in there, it does what it does without any deciding whether it should do it or shouldn't do it, whether it's good, whether it's bad. It just does what it does. In our creative process, we call this the soil. And if you can imagine planting a seed into the soil doesn't care whether you put a tomato seed in there, an orange seed in there, a banana tree seed in there, whatever you want to put in there, it doesn't care. It's going to do what the soil does. It's not going to judge that seed as being good or bad. It's just going to do what it does. Now, there are things that we can do to the soil, that we can improve the soil in different ways. Like we can clear out the weeds and the sticks and the garbage and all of the things that get buried in the soil. And we can get those cleared out so it makes it easier for our seed to grow. We can also add wonderful nutrients and water and things like that to bring in a healthier condition. We do that through our spiritual practices. We clear away the gunk, we add in the good things that are necessary, and that's how things begin to grow in a more healthy way. And so that's the second part of our Trinity, the soul. And the third part of our Trinity is the result, the effect, the body. As St. Patrick would have said, the Son. It is what happens, what is grown out of this perfect idea that gets planted into the soul, into the seed, into the soil, and then it makes something. So in our creative process, we take the perfect idea. I want a tomato plant. So I plant a tomato seed into my soil, and then I do what I need to do to make sure that soil is good and healthy, and voila, I grow a plant. That's our creative process in a nutshell. So we have our body here. So for your spiritual practice with that, put your fingers on the leaf that you've designated as body. Think of something that you want to bring into your life right now. Doesn't have to be big. It can be something. Maybe it's a challenge that you want to solve. Maybe it's an experience you want to have, a trip you want to take. Think of something that you want to bring into your life right now. That's represented on that petal that is for the body there. Okay. Now move to the mind petal. What is the spiritual truth about that? What is that perfect idea? So for instance, if I have a health challenge right now, my perfect idea would be wholeness. Then I know that nothing exists except this wholeness, this perfection, this divine flow of life energy through me. So if I want to go on a trip, the spiritual truth of that is everything is available to me at all times. That I live in a world of infinite abundance. That limitless possibilities exist. Those are spiritual truths. Okay. And for the third leaf, the soul, that's where we do our work. What limiting beliefs do I have about this? If I want to take a trip and I think I don't have enough money, that not having enough money is my limiting belief. So I need to do something to clear that out. And so I can do a lot of spiritual practices around that. And we have tons of them that are listed in our classes and our books. And you can even find them on the website. All you got to do is Google spiritual practices for abundance. And I guarantee you're going to get a lot of them. Find the thing that works for you. Do that practice. Clear out that soil and make that work. And then see what the results can be in your life. See how that changes. You can start any place on this petal. You can start with anything that you have. If you have a limiting belief right now that is very present in your mind, start with that. Okay, if this is my limiting belief, what is the spiritual truth about it? In the back of the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes has prayers for all different kinds of conditions that will help you get to that spiritual truth. We have licensed spiritual practitioners. That's their gift to you, is to know the truth. Call one up. The numbers are on our website. Call one up and ask them, what spiritual truth do I need to know if I'm feeling a lack and limitation, if I'm having a health challenge, whatever that is. They'll help you get to that spiritual truth. And then you do the work to bring more of the idea of the spiritual truth into your life and less of the limiting beliefs that you want to eliminate. And things will really begin to change in your life. This is how we transform ourselves. When I began my practitioner training, I was taking the treatment and meditation class, and I looked at my life and I thought, okay, what are my challenges? And so at that time it was relationships, finances, and health. And so every day as I was driving to work, I did a treatment for those three things. And it was interesting to watch how those things shifted in my life. For my treatment about finances, I started with a spiritual truth that wasn't quite there, that stretched me just a little bit. And that was, I have all I need to pay my bills on time. And it made me stretch a little bit because okay, but I'm not paying my bills on time. So is that true? Well, the truth is I have all I need. I just am not choosing to do it. So I worked with that, and it was amazing. Within 2 weeks, everything was up to date. I thought, well, this is cool. So then I thought, well, let's see what I could do with it next. So I changed it to I have all the money I need to pay my bills on time and have money left over. And what happened was my bank account started to grow. I actually had money left over after each paycheck, which was an unusual thing for me in my early 40s. So then I went to, I have all I need to pay, I have all the money I need to pay my bills and have money left over to do the things I want to do and support the causes I believe in. And then I began the practice of tithing. And that shifted everything for me. Because tithing is about giving from the consciousness that I already have enough. I'm not depleting myself. In this book, the Book of Joy, Desmond Tutu says, I don't think God's very good at math. He says, because no matter how much I give, God always makes sure I have enough, and more and more and more. He says, I don't think God can subtract right. He said, I should have less if I'm giving, but what I find out is I have more. And so it's been a wonderful practice to do that. So find those things in your life that are causing you some difficulties, some problems, and see if you can use a practice like this of looking at it. Again, what do we do here? We change perspective. We looked at the same thing from 3 different angles, from that holy trinity of mind, soul, and body, and began to see what we can do to change things in our lives with it. So let's take this into prayer. So prayer is one of our most powerful spiritual practices. As I just said, I learned to change my life by changing the way I prayed. And so our form of prayer is called affirmative prayer. It has 5 stages. In the first stage, we recognize that one. Again, all of those names that I went through, all of those qualities of it. We are speaking spiritual truth about the divine. In the second stage of the treatment is based on the premise, if God is all this and I am one with God, then I am all this too. And then we call that stage unification. The third stage, we just speak spiritual truth about the condition that we're treating about. Fourth stage is to give thanks, because really thanks is the only prayer we ever need to do. And then we release. We let it go. So if you would, with me, just turn within. I'm going to invite the practitioners to stand and surround the sanctuary here with their consciousness. These beloveds spend a minimum of 4 years studying. And then they have to take a really big test and a licensing panel to get to the place where they are. Each one of our practitioners here has been in service to this community for, I think, a minimum of 3 years. You're the youngest, yeah? Or the newest? All right. So if you would with me, just turn within. I do that by closing my eyes and taking a breath. It centers me in my body, brings me fully present into this moment. And so right here and right now, I know that there is only one divine, loving intelligence, one creator of all, that has brought forth everything into existence, that is the isness and the allness and the fullness of all life. I know that nothing exists beyond this one, and that this one is that creative, loving intelligence that shows up as unconditional love, as perfect peace, as abundance and harmony and humor. And because I know that there is only this one, I know that I am one with it. I know that all that I am, all that I have ever been, is a perfect and divine emanation of that creative love intelligence. I know that I am blessed with abundance and wholeness and perfection and love. And as I know this is true for me, I know this is true for everyone, because there is only one. And that each one of us is that perfect and divine manifestation of love. And so knowing this, I speak my word. Right here and right now, that I know that each one of us has within us all that we could ever need. That the perfection and the fullness of the divine is showing up beautifully and easily as each one of us. And I know that when we experience a challenge in our lives and turn to that truth shows itself up. It is magnified and multiplied, pressed down and running over. That is the very nature of who we are. It's who we've always been. It's who we will always be. Nothing but that perfect emanation of the divine. And how good it is to know this, how good it is to see it in action in this community, how good it is to feel it in my own life. I am so grateful, and I release this word into that divine, creative, love intelligence that knows no lack or limitation, that's always saying yes for the unfoldment of the highest and greatest good of all. I let it go, and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.